Imagine with me, if you will, when you were 7 years old, 8 years old. You're in the living room. You're standing on the sofa, and you cannot touch the floor because it is, what is it? Lava. I love the universality of it. The universality of it. Yes. I was playing the lava game, and I took a step from the couch to the hearth. And it was narrow, the hearth, the little thing in front of the fireplace. And it was a little narrow, and I almost lost my balance. So I grabbed a hold of this very sturdy-looking piece of wood called our mantle. And it held me up, but not without going, and it scared me. And a picture frame falls off the mantle and smashes in the brick, and psh. Now, my parents weren't home, because you don't play the lava game when your parents are home. Duh. But my big sister was. And I knew that I was vulnerable. And she comes in and says, "Don't worry about it. Just clean it up. Don't cut yourself." And we clean it up, and she tells my parents that I was dusting the living room. Doing a good chore like I was supposed to be doing instead of playing lava, and I merely bumped it off and it broke. Now, this morning when I said that in service, it was the first time I'd confessed that truth to anyone, including my parents, until just now. They found that out this morning. I got a text message. Where's Charlie? I did not have to pick my switch.
They didn't compliment you on what a good job of dusting you did?
Never. I still don't get complimented for my dusting. And what I learned in that moment was not only that when you jump from the couch to the mantle, do not trust, or the hearth, don't trust the mantle. I learned that I had in my sister an ally. I had an ally who would have my back even at her own potential peril. And she and I navigated growing up, not in opposition to our parents per se, but certainly on the other team. And we built this friendship from that lasts to this day. As you make your way around the living room thinking about how it is that I avoided lava throughout my whole life, I think that it wasn't against my parents, it was just that arrangement, because my parents were also significantly helpful to me. They supported me in the crazy things that I wanted to try and do. They let me play sports when it was very clear that was not my gift. They let me do theater. Not only let me do theater, but they encouraged me not to get a job so I could do more theater. Things like that. Very encouraging and supporting all throughout. I go to college, and I'm supported. I'm supported not only by people that I run into, but I'm supported by some of our infrastructure. Right? I got student loans from the government that was available to me. So I had support that way. And then I ran into teachers who could tell me the things that I was good at that I didn't know. I'll never forget when Harry Parker, who was the director of theater at Emporia, sat me down and he said, "Les, I don't always necessarily need you as the lead. You're a good actor." He goes, "and you could play some leads, but you're not always the lead. But I always want you on my cast. Because when you're in the rehearsal process, you make the whole process better. You bring a good work energy." And I grabbed identity because he said that, right? Like you get those few phrases that supported me and moved it along. And then I married Trish, and I found an ally and a friend that could be more honest with me about me than anyone on the planet, without me getting the same kind of defensive I would with anybody else, and actually know me better than anybody else. And actually, I was sharing this with her. I think she believes in my abilities more than I do on a regular basis, and I gain confidence from that. I have had incredible amounts of support With a spouse come in-laws, and it's a lot of fun to make jokes about in-laws. It's kind of a trope, but honestly, I have 2 sets of in-laws, and they're both wonderful. They've included me, they've supported me, they call me their son, and they have given me jobs when I was out of work and have supplied us with opportunities to kind of navigate the lean times. They've been very supportive in a lot of ways. Clever and to the point, and still, but also I feel compelled to say that I also found incredible support and buoyancy by the Methodist denomination. Now, I did not become a Methodist by choice. I think I've told everybody I can that that's what happened. I became a Methodist by Craigslist. I was doing some ministry work, and I wanted to see what it was like to work behind the scenes in a church, and so I was kind of looking for a part-time ministry type job, and I started taking some seminary courses, and Trish was looking for work, and she goes, "Hey, there's this job on Craigslist for a Methodist church in Milford, New Hampshire." I was like, "Why not? What's a Methodist?" And they were desperate, so they hired me. No, and we formed a great relationship and friendship. That was my first 2 years. And I found from that, there are disadvantages to large denominations. Anybody who's ever sat down and had coffee or beer with me has probably heard me on my spiels about that. But one of the things they're very good at is this connectivity thing. So when I then moved from New Hampshire to Kansas, the district superintendent of that region had a conversation and said, "Can I help you in your move?" They wanted me to do this other thing, and I was moving. And I said, "Well, I don't know anyone in Kansas. Do you?" And he goes, "Well, I don't know anyone, but there's a district superintendent in Wichita. There's 2 of them. Send me your stuff." Phone call, phone call, phone call, conversation, 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 many of which I don't think I know about. I actually think there were a whole lot more things going on behind the scenes than I knew about. And they said, "Hang out around First Church for a while. Just see what happens." And so then I ended up as a part of this community, and as of this week, that was 8 years ago. For those of you who are along for that ride, now we feel that much older together. I've been lucky. I've been blessed. I've been gifted. I've been fortunate. I've been privileged. I've been all those words. Like, there isn't one that's more right than the other, because they're all true. And now, after times of our lives when we were living on pancakes and pasta, and other times when I didn't think our unit was going to make it another week, I have a very happy family in a beautiful little suburban home on the west side of town with a goldfish pond and this cushy kind of wonderful. Guys, I have insurance. Okay, like for me, that is like a thing, right? Like not only auto insurance, because I've been without that, like auto insurance, homeowners insurance, health insurance through my wife, but health insurance, right? Life insurance, like I thought that was just for, the only things on TV. Like, and I find myself in this place where it's like, like there's a comfort, a security, all those things, right? Well, I would like to talk a little bit about Esther, but I really want to talk about me. But I also want to talk about us. Life is full of lava, right? And no matter how secure you think you are, we all know it can go away in a second, right? It doesn't matter how much insurance you have or how many whatever. Like, it's all very fragile. Life has lava everywhere. We all share that. And I think, looking in this room, I know that each of us have had people in our lives that have suspended us or held us through that. We've all grappled with that, and I know many of you have done that for others, and quite a few of you for me, actually. That kind of support and that kind of thing that happens, but that's just a commonality that we all have. I would like to consider this idea of what it means when we become comfortable or secure as individuals, but also as a community, that we feel like we have what we need, we're kind of safe, we're okay, and what kind of effect that has on us when we are in a location where it's very obvious that our neighbors are in deep suffering. That our neighbors right across the street, right out here, are in absolute crisis day to day. And what that means for us, what that means for them, and how that kind of parallels what's happening with Esther, who finds herself in this comfortable place, and then the peril of the marginalized Jewish people that is imminent, and what her response to that is, and what that might mean for us. Now, I think I could sit here and probably try and come up with statistics on children living in poverty. I could talk about the homeless. I could talk about the working poor. I could talk about people of color. I could talk about LGBT. I could talk about all kinds of groups, demographics, names, whatever, and talk about the names and the numbers and put up on the wall these huge problems that we should work together to help solve or alleviate. The problem is I don't really know. I don't have that answer. I mean, I really don't. I don't know how I look at a room that has, 20 people in it and a few people streaming, or really even a sanctuary of 300 people, of I don't think I have all the ideas that say, this is how we're going to solve homelessness in Wichita. I don't have that. I'm not that smart. Now, I have ideas. You want to talk to me? I think we got to figure out how to put a bathroom out here. It can be done. Cities have done it. I don't know all the ins and outs of that, but that's not what this is. What I really want to talk about is when an individual or a group experiences significant security, we begin to have the illusion that we have control. I love the control that I think I have in my life. It feels so very good. And guys, it has not been that long in my life that I've felt it. And so it feels really good, right? Like I said, I have insurance. I have a calendar. I have a calendar that I can open and I can put in a date for 5 days from now. And with a certain amount of certainty, know I'm going to make that appointment. Do you realize how privileged that is? That I can schedule a 10 o'clock on Thursday and be 95% sure that I'm going to go, I'm going to be there. I'm going to make that. Because my life is predictable enough, because I have enough security in place, that I can make a 10 o'clock appointment. I love my calendar. I love that I can predict my week, and unless somebody's a big old jerk face, I can have everything that I put in that week. Right? I mean, somebody hits my vehicle and now I have to go do other things, right? I mean, accidents happen. But that is something. What has then also happened is because I have a predictable calendar and I can fill it in with certain things and I can commit to this and this and this and this and I have this and this and this and this, I have no time for anybody else's crisis or mess. Right? Because I know what my time is and I've committed my time and now I don't have time or energy. Same thing with my money, right? I now know how to run a budget. So I can budget this and this and this and this and it's all accounted for. Leave me alone. It happens in institutions too, by the way. We have our space, we have our camera, we have our lights, we have our heat, we have our cooling, we have our building, we have our parking, we have all that stuff as an institution. We have our committees, we have our leadership, we have our whatever. We have our budget. We budget it, and it's there, and it's accounted for, and we don't have anything else for anybody else. Please don't bother us. So what's the solution? The solution comes to us in some really hard words that we read often enough that they somehow soften from Jesus, who says, hey, if you want to do this, you deny yourself and you take up your cross. And what I love about this scripture that I haven't ever read before, the ones you read over and over and and then you see it again and you're like, oh, I never noticed that word. Deny yourself and take up your cross every day. Now, I don't know what the original Greek is. Maybe it's, every moment or every 18 minutes. I don't know. But it's consistently. It's consistent and it's repeated every day. And follow me. And I don't know how that works. And I don't know what it means for you, and I barely know what it means for me. I absolutely don't know what it means for you. Esther has this fascinating, really cool story. I would actually encourage everybody to take the time to read the 10 chapters of Esther. I read it in an hour, which means most of you can do it in 45 minutes. It's just, I don't read quickly. I read well, I just don't read quickly. Cool story, a lot of ins and outs. I mean, it's like they could put the thing on HBO and people would watch it. It's got all that stuff. And the story of Esther is just fascinating. I mean, Kate covered some of it, but she's born a Jew in a time of exile. The Babylonians beat the Israelites and they enslaved them, and then the Persians came and squashed the Babylonians, but that didn't get the Jews off the hook. They were still enslaved, just to a bigger kingdom. And Esther's born into this, and then her parents die. So, I mean, she should have been born into that. Remember the Jeremiah text that we read for like a year? Maybe some of you remember. It was like, build houses, grow gardens, have children, all of that. You remember that?
Bloom where you're planted.
Bloom where you're planted is what it is. Yeah. That's the exile test. Her family was probably just, going to grow some tomatoes and make some babies. Like, that's all their call was to do while in exile, but then she loses her parents. Orphanage is not, or being an orphan is not good at any point in time. It's really bad if you're Jews in exile in Persia. She's kind of rescued by her uncle Mordecai. He adopts her, but she gets rescued only as much as a woman can be rescued in this time, right? Because the queen loses her job for not subjugating herself to whatever humiliation was up, and now they need to find a new queen, and so they parade all the single ladies in the land. It's an hour prep. It's 6 months of makeup, 6 months of oil, 1 night of trial, and whoever wins gets the job as the queen. Guys, I'm serious. It's not VeggieTales beauty contest. It's gross. The whole thing is. But it's what happened. It's in the Bible. You should read it. She becomes queen, and oddly enough, she becomes queen not only because Mordecai kind of is there to give her a leg up. What were they called? The servants who prepared the makeup and got her through that year of prep. They found a liking for her, and so they gave her clues and tips and kind of elevated her status in such a way to help her win this competition. So she had some sofa cushions, right, to stay out of the lava. So then she finds herself as royalty in this place of privilege, and now the sub story and. Takes an hour to read. I could tell it within 3. Haman is this other guy who raises Haman, or Haman. He rises to power. He's one of the king's right-hand men. And what's fascinating here, and the only reason I'm going into it because I never get to nerd out the way that Cindy and Kate do because they're smarter than me. But this moment makes me feel good. Is that Haman is actually an Agagite, which is part of a descendant of the Amalekites, however you say that, right? And Mordecai, the Jewish uncle, is a descendant of the house of Saul. He's the tribe of Benjamin and part of the house of Saul. You remember a couple of weeks ago we had Saul and the Amalekites at war? 500 years later, their descendants are peeving each other off in the streets, right? Kicking dirt on each other's shoes. Haman wants everybody to bow, and Mordecai's like, I think not. And he's like, who's that guy? And they're like, he's Jewish. And they're like, okay, well, I'm going to write an edict to kill all Jews for a day. It's going to be genocide day because that guy won't bow, right? And they get into this thing, as guys do. And so then Mordecai finds out about it, and he goes to Esther. He's like, you got to help us. All the Jews are going to be killed all in one day. And she's like, what am I supposed to do? It's against the law to approach the king. And if I approach the king, I can be put to death. And he's like, well, either you're going to help us or we will be, and this is what's odd. He says, we'll be saved anyway. But you won't be a part of that. And you won't escape the fate. It reminds me of something one of my early mentors once said, and I'm going to be a little harsh here. I softened it in the morning. He was one of my first Methodist bosses and clergy, and I was having a bit of a crisis. He was too, and he goes, I believe one thing. I believe that the work of Jesus Christ will continue. I'm not entirely sure that the Methodist Church is going to be part of it. To which I could also say, I'm not sure I'm going to be a part of it. I'm not sure we're going to be a part of it. We have to be proactively engaged in order to be a part of something that's happening anyway. And Esther has a moment, and she says, okay, gather all the Jews, have them fast, and we'll go into, and I'll do that with my servants. And then she makes the decision. She's going to approach the king, and she says the words, if I perish, I perish. Deny yourself and take up your cross and follow what you know is good. I think this model is the only one we have to go on. And I'm getting goosebumps because it scares me to death. It was not as scary 10 years ago when I didn't have the same insurance that I have now. It wasn't as scary when I lived in a 700 square foot duplex. Here's looking at some of you that we all had good times in. But that it is now when I live in kind of a cushy house out in the suburbs. It's scarier now to think about that than it was then. Why do I even write these things? But I have to read the same stories and know it's going to be okay when I'm running out of time. I read the same stories and I have to know it's going to be okay, right? Because what happens? She approaches the king. He's like, what do you want? And then it all works out that they get to write another edict, because you can't unwrite an edict, that says that the Jews can gather around, defend themselves for 2 days, not just 1 day. And as the Old Testament does, it paints a victory because the other guys died by the thousands and hundreds of thousands. But never mind that. That's a problem with the Scripture I have to reconcile. It's good news because the Jews are liberated from their certain death, right? And Purim is actually created out of those 2 days, and it's still celebrated today. What I want to encourage all of us, and I think it's as much for me as anybody, is that denying ourselves and taking up our cross does not necessarily mean that we will perish. It means that we can work in the divine spirit for good and actually make exciting things happen. That our work together, when we're willing to give that up, can actually bring the kingdom alive here and now in this moment. And I want to finish with this story. The story is about a woman who tells her story actually pretty publicly. Some of you have heard it. Her name is, this is what happens when you don't follow the cards, Auburn Sanborn tells her story. I heard it on The Moth. It is about a phone call. She is deep in the throes of addiction. She has a newborn baby, a husband who's out trying to find drugs, and she's having a fetal position in the floor of the hotel type crisis. She has in her hand a piece of paper that has a phone number that her mother sent her. She doesn't talk to her mom, but somehow her mom got her this phone number to a Christian counselor. Said, if you won't talk to me, if you ever need it, call this number. And she said, well, I really don't care a rip about the Christian whatever, but I could use somebody. And so I finally build up the nerve at 2 a.m. to call this number. The guy answers the phone. I can hear him shuffle around. I've clearly woken him up. And I say, hey, I got your phone number from my mom, and she thought that I could use a Christian counselor. And though I'm not really into all of that, I need you to know that I am broken. And she begins to talk. And she talks, and she talks, and he encourages, and he listens, and she talks, and he encourages, and she listens. And she says, the sun comes up, 2 a.m, till the sun comes up, and he is still on the phone with me. And I would love to tell you that I hung up the phone and I got clean and everything went great from that moment on. That's just not how it works. But as I got to the end, I said, hey, listen, you're the counselor. What should I do? And he said, well, I've been trying to avoid this topic the whole conversation, but that number? You got the wrong number. I'm not a counselor. And he said, but I wish you well. And she hung up the phone, knowing that there is a love out there somewhere that is unconditional, and it was for her. She calls it a pinprick of light in which grace found its way into her life. I think we can each be that pinprick if we are willing to take up our cross. Amen?